Good morning or afternoon. Thank you for joining SafetyChain's webinar today. Delighted to be sharing a little bit of information about how leveraging real-time data can help drive better everyday results. My name is Jill Bender. I'm the VP of Marketing here at SafetyChain Software. Delighted also to have Dave Detlar, my colleague in sales. Good morning, Dave, or afternoon to you.
Hey, Jill. Afternoon for me. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we have our quite a few people joining us today. A few quick housekeeping tips, and then we'll go ahead and get started. For privacy reasons, I should only be able to see the panelists, but I'm delighted with the folks that are coming online today. Thank you for joining us. We hope to make this an interactive session. There will be a Q&A, but feel free to enter questions into the Q&A tab at any time. This is being recorded, so you will automatically receive a link to the recording. And we hope, again, to make this as interactive. So if you have questions, please jump in and put them in there, and we'll get to those. So for today's agenda, fairly straightforward. We're going to talk a little bit about the power of real-time data and the challenges that the food safety and quality operations currently have without access to that data in real time. We'll share a little bit about how to get the data intelligence needed to get better results from the data you're already collecting within your facilities and sites and so forth. And then just share a little bit about SafetyChain, the case studies, and so forth. We're also very excited. SafetyChain has a new powerful business intelligence tool, SafetyChain Analytics, and Dave will be sharing that as well as the other parts of the technology that enable real-time data. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So we would like to start with this image in respect that if we were all in a live room, I would say, how many people rely on their smartphones? And I can guarantee 100% of people raise their hands. A lot of people usually raise both their hands. And it's for good reason. Our smartphones typically make us smarter. They give us access to data, whether it's for a work standpoint on how the directions to get to somewhere, perhaps to make us a bit more fit and ensuring that we're not just sitting latent and not getting our steps in, if you will. But the point is, we all rely on real-time data every day. It keeps us informed, it makes us more efficient, and I would say perhaps it makes us a bit smarter. But when you think about that,
I'm sorry, Jill, I wasn't paying attention. I was looking at my cell phone.
Oh, yes, you were. And so most people, they get a bit smarter. When you think about the data that's flying around from a food safety and quality operations standpoint, there's data everywhere. And I know everyone online can nod their heads here and say, yes, there's data coming at me from everywhere. And you rely on that to really ensure your food safety and quality. But what's interesting and the challenge there is because data is coming from you everywhere, how to best manage that? You know, in all these areas, you need to rely on that in order to ensure that your safe quality product, whether it's relying and ensuring that your specifications are being met from a quality and customer standpoint, or your safety specifications from internal or HACCP protocols or FSMA protocols, making sure that information is being followed up, whether it's CAPAs or just, you know, checks that happen before a product gets out the door. Relying on data is imperative to making sure that you're able to do your job effectively. However, though, unfortunately, data is typically not available in real time. We know this, we see this time and time again, and Dave is, you know, the road warrior, right? Dave is going out to tons of different prospect sites, and this is very common. We see forms being used to do all your quality and safety checks, or inboxes being used to manage all your supplier compliance COAs and forms and data. Tons of filing cabinets and piles of paper when an auditor comes to town. And again, the idea here is that without the real-time data, it's making your job harder, whether to, you know, again, to be staying informed, more efficient, and more importantly, to manage issues at the earliest point possible.
Jill, I'm sure there's several of us on the phone that can remember the days when there's a pride of that filing cabinet. You know, we look at how great my folders are filed, and I have everything in this proper order. And, you know, I think there's something to be said for that for sure. And I know many of you on the phone have created these great programs, but the idea that that data that lives on that piece of paper is just not helping you out. You know, unless you're spending the time to rekey that information or get it someplace else, it's just really difficult to come by. And we've also gone through some studies here recently there's money behind that, right? Meaning just money simply in filling up that filing cabinet and then managing that filing cabinet as well. But it is something that we've all taken pride in over the years, and I think that now it's starting to kind of get to a tipping point where maybe it's a little bit more embarrassing to say, hey, I got a room full of filing cabinets that I can't get rid of, right? I need the extra space, Jill.
No, and absolutely. And I think that the concept and where we're going here is the data is not lacking. We know that. Good programs are put in place and continuously happening to ensure that your programs are meeting the high standards of your customers' internal as well as regulatory standards and non-regulatory standards. But there comes challenges with that. You know, the reactionary versus the prevention. You know, how many people have, you know, looked at a COA that came in latent, and meanwhile the product's already gone into processing, or perhaps a check that didn't get done and it wasn't discovered until the manufacturing was already started, and then a few hours later there has to be a stop. So all those challenges really do put you in a situation where you just don't have transparency or visibility. Certainly manual labor intensive. I know we all wear running shoes sometimes, managing and running around facilities and sites to make sure things are done. And then to what Dave was saying, you know, certainly being buried in paper, and you know, we used to joke about the forklift of paper, and I remember when our customers said, no, that's how it used to be. But I think that the more discerning part is a lot of times the records are incomplete, and more importantly, could be inaccurate, which definitely leads to the challenges. But if you look at that, there's risk with those challenges. You know, the main risk is non-compliance. But you think about that, what does that correlate to? You know, I've already talked about that, whether it's line shutdowns, shipping delays, the costs related to waste or rework, so those returns, and then certainly the other areas, failed audits, you know, and the higher risk is certainly a recall. Here at SafetyChain, we're acutely aware, and as I'm sure everyone is on this phone, of all the different news that's just coming at us. You know, the real-time data is coming at us about recalls, and much more in the last 3, 4, 5 years that we've seen the propensity of the consumer being aware of when something happens. And unfortunately, that is having a huge impact on protecting the brand and also the bottom line in the business. So
the truth of the matter is, Jill, you started on a slide up front, Jill, where you showed a smartphone, and I made the joke that I was on my smartphone, because I'm assuming the number of attendees we have on the phone today, someone's probably on their phone looking at something else right now. But the idea around this, and this, not only is it uncovering the data and helping that data become meaningful, but think about the other side, and I'll hit on this as I go through a little bit later here in the webinar. But the idea that you've become accustomed, just like all of the consumers who purchase, who eat, who acquire your food, they've become accustomed, we've all become accustomed to instantaneous feedback, right? Something happened. All of a sudden it's on Twitter. You're so well aware of the news. We don't live in a news cycle anymore where every morning you get a newspaper delivered, and that news is basically a day late. And then in the evening you watch the 6 o'clock news, you know, or whatever it is, the 11 o'clock news going back. But the idea is that news is now a constant cycle, right? And the idea that the quicker you have access to this data, whether that's a customer inquiry, whether that's a regulatory inquiry, whether that's just a flat-out internal inquiry on how things are being done, people are accustomed to very quick response times. Not, okay, well, let me go back through my filing cabinets and find that information, and I'll get it back to you in 24 hours. So I think there's another area here, Jill, not only of the risk or the brand and how we're going to make that data smarter, but it's an expectation that basically in society we're all getting to today. The idea that instantly I expect feedback, right? This happened, you know, all of a sudden it's spread out across Twitter and Facebook, and, you know, the news travels so much quicker today. And the idea that access to this data and information, you know, in a moment's notice, in seconds, in 1 click, in 2 clicks to get access to that information is quite helpful in protecting the brand, also protecting your name and giving that first, you know, that first blush, that first reaction time has been quite helpful from our customers as well.
No, absolutely, David. I think it's interesting because personally, if I'm not getting the update and on my personal stuff, you know, kind of off my smartphone, I'm actually very annoyed with it, right? People are expecting real-time data, and what we're excited about and what can now be forwarded to our industry, the food and beverage industry, is having that same efficiency in real-time data within your operations to make sure that you're getting the best results possible. So when you think about it, really the impact, and this slide just sort of shows the cost of what it costs from a reaction versus prevention of discovery of a noncompliance or an issue. The longer it takes, the higher the cost, and we know that, and this isn't something that, you know, is earth-shattering news, but I think it's a real good visual in the respect that you have programs, processes, protocols in place. You already are defining and improving your programs based on whatever regulatory, non-regulatory measures, internal, customer that you need to achieve. And the goal here is that to get conformancy, to get everyday execution against those programs, you need to be able to leverage your data more effectively so you can get more into preventive approach versus reactionary. So I'll challenge you all. Really, is your data helping or hindering your organization? And we would like to propose that your data could and should be helping you a lot more than it is today. So I'm really excited to pass over the ball, if you will, to Dave, and he will share a little bit about the key ways in which technology can help. Dave?
Thanks, Jill. That is a great segue, and I'm hoping that everyone is now seeing a different screen, and we're going to continue down this conversation path. So there really is 4 key ways, you know, as Jill mentioned, that we've kind of identified here that we're going to focus on today. There's obviously many of other ways and directions to go about it, but at the highest level. And what I'm going to try to do here today, and for many of you on the phone, you're in for a treat because we're going to try to change this up a little bit. I'm going to try to show you some active software as we go through these examples today. Hopefully that'll keep you engaged. I know we're in the summer season, and you know you're probably thinking about your vacation or whatever it might be. But we're going to try to change this up and hopefully keep it interactive, as Jill said, and show you some live software as we go through it. But you know, as Jill had mentioned, there's just some simple things that have happened kind of across society at this point that we're now seeing starting to be adopted across the food and beverage industry. One of that is automation, right? And when I say automation, think years ago everyone thought of automation, right? Instead of us having you know, a whole line full of people maybe with knives cutting chicken, we have, you know, laser jet fueled processing pieces of equipment, right? You have, instead of someone sitting there with a beaker and shaking the beaker up and down, we have lab equipment, right? So automation has existed in this industry for a long time. However, what Jill hit on is automation around capturing that data, automation about making sure that those great programs that you've put in place are being tracked, they're being done appropriately, right? And we'll talk through some examples of that. The second piece is this concept of smart data collections. How does the data actually get off that floor, right? For many of you, and fortunately I know some of you on the phone, I know some of you, your jobs are to have the eyes and the ears on the floor, right? Unfortunately, what's happened in this industry at this point is that many of you professionals are taken away from that floor, from that visual exercise, from that walkthrough, because you're trying to go gather data. You're having someone rekey in data, and then you're trying to analyze it and put it together into some other system or produce it for some report or some customer requirement. And what we're going to talk about today is that idea of that smart data collection. Wherever that point of data resides, let's get that data into a system so you can start to analyze it and record it, but also real-time verify, right? Jill made a real, I think, a great point around prevention versus reaction. That's what everything's driving towards, right? Many of you are on this phone because, you know, FSMA's been shoved down your throat for a little while. And oh my goodness, let's be, you know, what's going to happen with FSMA? The key area of FSMA is prevention, right? Rather than driving our car, looking out the windshield, for years in the industry, we've been driving the car looking out the rearview mirror. Reports that are latent by a day, you know, analytics, the results that are coming back 24 hours later. The idea that we're constantly looking behind the scenes rather than driving that car and looking at the dashboard. And that brings us to that third part, which is continuously monitoring that car as you're driving it, right? How am I doing? Where do I live? Is that food safety compliance? Is that quality compliance? It's both. It's a combination of both. And I'm going to show you some examples of that today, how once you have that data into a system and you start to have those tools available to you, you really can start to help use this data to drive the business. And I think that's an important concept. Again, I know many of you have worked really hard on these regulations and your customer requirements and, GFSI schemas that you're going through. The idea that there's a lot of data, as Joe mentioned, that's being captured, and that ability to start to resonate and show that. And we have customers, I'll show you a couple examples here today, live, real time, on the floor, in their facilities, in their break rooms, showing these type of statistics, showing this type of information to help better run the organization. And then the last piece, like I started talking with Jill about briefly, that idea of being ready anytime, at any moment. It's not, hey, hold on, let me go run and get this information, or let me have the folks over here in the admin room go pull a bunch of records. The idea that at a moment's notice, and that's kind of the expectation I know you all have today, right? And you all have that in your world, in your life, but the idea that real time going to find that information in a centralized repository really helps you expedite that process and do root cause analysis and mitigate and manage those customer requirements. So these are the areas we're going to hit on. Hopefully, Jill, I didn't miss anything here. But I'm just going to walk through a couple examples of each of these as we go through it. Yeah, so I didn't miss anything, Jill? We're doing okay so far?
No, you're doing good. Everyone should put their phones down and pay attention, right?
Yeah, I believe so. So let's look at the first one. And like I said, we're going to try and go back and forth here. So bear with it. If there's any latency, Jill, please keep your eyes on the screen too. But I'm going to go back and forth here a little bit. We're going to go out of PowerPoint. I know a lot of you sign up for these and you see a lot of PowerPoints. We're going to look at some live system too and software as we go through this. So when we talk about ensuring supply chain controls, right, and what automation actually means to you, it may be different than what it means to us too. But I think it's a generic term. But the idea is that you can start to you can start to configure those requirements that you've already put together of that great program. So going to automation shouldn't entail you having to go rewrite a whole bunch of programs. Rather, you have great programs in place that you've been running. And what we're going to try and do is help configure those programs around the system around those programs, I should say, and then provide the ability to start to monitor and trend this type of information. So as you see my screen change here and come back up, what you're looking at is actually a compliance dashboard. It's a compliance monitoring dashboard. Again, I see many of you on the phone. I know some of you oversee multiple facilities. What you're looking at here is a 2-facility chart that's actually monitoring overall compliance. And when I say that, many of you, hopefully your eyebrows raise. Well, what's overall compliance mean? Well, it could be your food safety compliance. It could be, in this case, your swabbing program, a GMP audit. It could be your pre-ops. It could be your quality checks, right, that are being done. So the idea here is I'm giving you a pretty vast example, and this is over a specific period of time. So this is over 12 months. And again, maybe this is across all of my resources or items that I'm processing. Maybe it should be on a specific item that I process or throughout the day, throughout the week, or for a specific customer. But what you're seeing here is a trending chart over a period of time. And not only is it telling you and giving you information to these trends, but this is where you start to just get naturally, think about how long it would take you in a paper-based world, in an Excel-based world, to go back through and say, okay, what are my most problematic forms that I have today, right? And that's what you're seeing here down at the bottom. The bottom 5 performing forms, my pre-op sanitation, right, my HACCP plan, my CCP metal detector, it's really doing poorly. And I know for many of you on the phone, that's not a realistic number, but sometimes in a demonstration site, it's fun to show non-compliance rather than compliance. Compliance can become boring. But you'll see here, so wouldn't it be nice to know very quickly, this is where I'm having the majority of my failures. Where is that one spot that I need to improve on? And in this case, it's just rolling it up very quickly into a nice, clean little dashboard here, right? And also for many of you, you'll see record sign-offs are always important. So you'll see a little widget here showing record sign-offs. But the idea that a system like this this is simple, right? This is just starting to roll up different programs into an overarching look, and I'm actually comparing it against locations. But if we break this down into something that I'm assuming many of you on the phone are quite familiar with, sure, many of you have a supplier program, right? Be nice to understand, and you'll see over here on the right side of the screen, where you stand with your suppliers. How many tasks are outstanding? What tasks have been completed? Have any tasks been started, right? What tasks have been started? Where am I at? And you'll see throughout, not only in this little right-hand widget of how automation and technology can help, but now think about some of the other more common features where you come in here and you say, you know what, I just want to see everything that's, past due. Show me all those reds, right? Give me the things I need to look at and actually review, right? And we're going to talk a little bit later, actually in the next part of this, but also that ability for a system to alert you, to generate notifications to you. You don't have to come in here and go grinding through data to find it. Hopefully you're seeing it's quite easy to find that information as it is. How nice would it be if a system, think of it as your personal assistant, starts emailing you and going, hey, Jill, by the way, this document's past due. This document needs to be completed, right? And I'm showing this from a supplier example, obviously. But the idea that this is quite simple for any of your internal documents, your supplier program. What if you want to search and find that specific supplier? Hey, let me drill into this Food Materials International, one of my suppliers. I can see all of their documents I can require. I can see if any of these things have been past due. And I can see, maybe things that I should follow up on, right? So the idea that quick access at your fingertips. I've only clicked now a couple times in the system, right? And I'm showing you a world of knowledge that I'm sure many of you are trying to get access to, or if you have access to it today, it's a cumbersome effort to get that information together and pull it together, right? So let me pull back here to this slideshow and bring you up on the next step that we talked about. And for this one, I'm gonna just keep this to a conversation and we'll roll back into the system. But this is important, right? Where we see the industry going today, and over the course of the last 6.5 years that we've been doing this in this industry and designing software just for the industry, is ease of use. Many of you are sitting on the phone. I have conversations every day, every week with people who are concerned, right? Well, I don't want to slow down my operations. Automation can't slow down your operations. It can't slow down your end users. It can't be more difficult for your suppliers to provide information online than it is for them to do it via email, right? All those things have to be taken into consideration when you're looking at starting to capture that data, right? We talk many times, as I scroll over here, about mobile technology. And SafetyChain has its own mobile apps available in Android and the Apple Play Store, right? And the idea that these apps are, designed after what we're all doing, what Jill and I were kidding about, what many of you are doing on this call right now. You're on your phone. You're kind of half paying attention a little bit. But the idea is that we had to design these apps to take into consideration how people are using their devices today. Not only that, but what the tools allow you to do is actually provide much greater prevention, as Jill mentioned, than reaction. Think about when you do forms on a paper-based form. It's just sitting there accepting an end user writing data on it, and then expecting them most times to read the direction of what has occurred. So the idea here around smart data collection is that, number one, and especially on the example you're seeing here from this mobile device in the center of your screen, number one, based on the entry, the screen can dynamically, with logic, right? If I say yes, it may have 3 other questions. If I say no, it may not have another question. If I enter in 32 degrees rather than 37 degrees, it may open up another series of questions that are required for me to complete. So think about that, again, that great program you've put in place, and then in turn, the great forms that you've already put in place, they still sit there on a piece of paper and they're not logical. They don't give instant feedback to that end user where it's applicable. So that's really a big deal about smart data collection and that real-time analysis. Like I said, the ability to send out alerts and notifications to end users, to supervisors, right? I always love that when you read a paper-based form, right, at the very end, it says, well, if this happens, go call Jill right away, right? Wouldn't it be nice if the system just knew to go email Jill and say, hey, Jill, something's happened? That all happens with automation. That all happens with these tools. Not only that, but then some real cool technology, like the ability to take pictures and photographs of what you're seeing when you're doing an audit or when you're doing an inspection, or the idea that suppliers can actually interact, right, directly from a portal and have bi-directional communication with you. Also the ability, I'm sure many of you are sitting here on the phone going, yeah, Dave, that's great, but I work in a facility that was created in, 1945, and it has thick cement walls, and we don't have great Wi-Fi, right? The idea that these apps and these forms that you're seeing were actually created with an offline mode in mind, right? So as you walk through the facility, if you lose connectivity, or if you're out in the field, I see some growers on the call today, right? If you're out in the field and you don't have connectivity, you can still do and manage and use all this logic on the forms, and then once you're reconnected, it generates up into the system. So very important is that second piece, which is how we get data in, but I think the most important part of that is usability. So whenever you're evaluating a technology, whether that's SafetyChain's or anyone's, it's got to be user-friendly and user-friendly for that end user to pick up very quickly and utilize. Which then brings us to the third piece. So now I got the data in the systems, right? And now we're talking a little bit more, not just those trends that I showed you to start out with, those compliance trends, but the idea that you need to continuously monitor your business, right? And this is where we start to talk about that impact of helping you make decisions. So I'm going to come over to a different screen back here in the live environment, and I'm actually going to show you some analytics that we have. Again, just sample analytics, hoping this will get your minds kind of, thinking about it. I'm sure this might create questions as well. But what you're seeing here is actually a records dashboard. This dashboard is configurable. So an end user can actually take and manage their little reports that they have on their dashboard. How nice would that be, right? The idea that you can take a dashboard, you can configure it, you can configure reports, and it shows you the most common maybe features or trends or things that you want to see. You'll see up top here, on the dashboard, I have it, you can, design different ranges. How often do you get requested for something that is, hey, can I see the last 30 days of these reports? Or can I see that last processing run we did for customer A? Or can I see everything that happened last Monday, right? All that can be set up, and you can use that as a filter, right, within the system as we go through it. Right here I have it set for 60 days, again, a demo environment, so I'll use a little bit longer of a string for you guys to see it. So this is just an example. On the left side, you're going to see some different filters. Maybe I want to see all the things that have failed, right? I just want to see the items that have failed. Show me those items. Maybe show me those items by different locations or whatever that might be. As we talked about earlier, you may even drill down into specific forms, right, as you go through this. But you'll see the different filters on your left side of your screen. One of the nice ones that I like to show here is if I bring up the record summary report, right? The idea here, this should hopefully feel familiar to you, right? These are all the records coming into the system. You'll see the records down here below that I can drill directly into. I can see the status of those. I can filter off the status of those. I can realign those statuses, right? Just show me the passes. Just show me the fails. Maybe I want to see just a specific user who's doing it. But the idea that you can constantly filter this information, you can also export it out. I'm sure many of you on the phone are asked all the time, hey, can you send me over a report for blah, 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 right? For the last 30 days of this processing, for the last 30 days of this item, whatever it might be. All of that's capable in here. But as we start to drill down and see a couple other, and these are some of our standard reports in the system. You obviously can configure reports on your own. But these are a couple of fun ones that we have built in here, just standard. One of the items that you'll see here, and this is common, we hear a lot about, is as you're going through these processes, you're looking to have some kind of mathematical formula calculated to it, right? So I'm going to look at my breast meat fat percentage in this example, and you'll see here, again, just from a simple form, this was a sample form where data was entered in, you'll see counts, you'll see the system start to do averages and medians and standard deviations and minimums and maximums. A very good way for you to start to see those items that maybe you should start to pay attention to, right, or show some extra attention to. This is an example of processing. I'm sure many of you have a receiving program in place today. Okay, at that receiving place, I do a certain set of samples. Here are the samples that I've captured and the averages and the medians of those samples for the head circumference, for example. In this case, I'm looking at an artichoke. Or maybe the net weights, right? What are the net weights that are coming across here? Let me see the average of those net weights. All important information. I'm assuming they can help drive the business, right? But where we take it one step further is combining all that together. So if I'm going to show you something here, we call this ops monitoring, and I'm going to take out the artichoke so I have all my data in here. You'll see my filter carried over. This is, we call it ops monitoring. Many of you will see this as both ops monitoring and statistical process control, right? X-bar, X-bar S charts. These charts are actually refreshed, right? And they can be refreshed up to every minute of time. As I mentioned, some of our customers are using these charts to monitor different processes on a big screen in their facility, or in their break room, or whatever that might be. I think this one's fun here to show you an example, because this is very common. I get a lot of head nods when we talk to a lot of people. Many of you do calibration checks, I'm assuming, or you're at least familiar in the industry of doing calibration checks. Well, what you'll see here is this is a thermometer calibration, right? And I'm going to pull back to this example all the way back to the beginning here in a moment, but the idea that you have boiling point calibration. If I have any failures that have happened, what are the different calibration methods that I'm using, right? So I'm using boiling point and ice point. What's the breakdown of those? From an ice point standpoint, what are my passes? What are my fails? How many am I doing? And this doesn't have to be smushed together either, right? You can easily expand these out to start to see the detail. You can drill down into the actual records as you go through it. But a nice way that we've seen people not only start to capture those really critical, quality attributes as you go through it, but also then that ability to start to capture and trend any of those other areas. So you'll see an example here where I'm doing X-bar and R-bar charts on deposits, right, and topping deposits, weight control, but at the same time, I'm marrying that together into my dashboard with metal detector checks. I got to make sure those metal detector checks are happening. So this is where our system can really start to aggregate this all together in a nice, neat little package, and start to give you those tools, that data, right? That data that you crave, that you strive for, and we can start to expose it out to your end users. And this can be available, again, anytime, real time. You can see that the screens will refresh depending on the time that you want them to refresh if you're using, like I said, monitors and so forth throughout the facility. So hopefully a good example that resonated there. I'm going to come back to just one more slide, and then Jill and I will kind of start to wrap this up. But the idea that we just talked about continuously monitoring and improving your results. Now, I'm hoping this will be something that will spin your cap. So not only can technology give you that data, but it also, as I keep mentioning these programs, it can also help you in the program aspect of it. So monitoring your programs and giving you that one centralized repository for all your records, right? Perform root cause analysis and so forth. So let's take a look at this back in the system, a little bit of a live example. And when I say one system that's doing all of this, the first thing I'm going to show you is something called a program viewer. This program viewer, I was in here earlier, so I see a couple Canadian companies on, CFIA you might be familiar with. I'll show you an SQF example for many of you on here in a second. But the idea is that you have these programs in place. We talked about filing cabinets. I'm sure everyone at one point in your time has had a 3-ring binder red folder, right, that you captured all of this data and you kept it in line with the different cues and the codes. Well, think about a system like SafetyChain that can take, okay, so here's, for example, 3.2 is a HACCP plan. It's part of my program. As part of that program, I have to have specific documents, right, that are in place that show the backup to that program. That might be an SOP. It might be a work instruction. It might be the actual regulation itself, right? Many of you have these. This is your SOPs. This is your SSOPs, all in place. And then, by the way, when you go through that for 3.2, you have your documents. You also have your forms that are capturing that data today, right? Your CCP check, your HACCP plan, metal detector check you'll see here, right? The idea that not only can our system start to aggregate this all together where you have a program, you have documents for that program, you have forms for that program, you also then have the records for that program, right? So show me all of the records that were part of my HACCP plan, that all of the checks that I've done. Maybe you want to filter those, again, just by the failures. Just show me the non-compliant values. For many of you have been asked for that report before, right? Show me your non-compliance over the last 6 months. Show me your non-compliance over the last week. Who did those non-compliances? When were they done? What was the outcome of that non-compliance? All of that can be captured in our system. If I take it a step further, sorry to show you the Canadian code for many of you U.S. folks, but I'm sure many of you U.S. folks are quite familiar with the code I'm showing you here as well, right? Here's the SQF code. You can do the same exact thing with the SQF code where you can store and house your documents, keep track of those documents, have any forms in here that roll up to it. Think about a auditor coming in and actually could even start doing a documentation audit online before they come in and review your results or whatever that might be. So let's take this one step further. So now you have your programs in the system. And I'm just going to back up here and show you a real easy, simple report. How many times would it be important for you, as we talk about root cause analysis, for you to come into a system and say, hey, you know, I want to see anything that's happened, whatever, over the past 3 months. We'll go to today. So I'm just running a report from April to July. And by the way, I want to see that for lot number 1, 2, 3, right? Or ingredient number ABC, or whatever it is. But a key identifier in here that you can now very quickly go through, pull out that number, and let's use 1, 2, 3. So I think that'll have some data around it. And very quickly have a system that shows you everything that's been done in regard to that lot number. So here's my breast meat tally for that number. Here's my cooked weight for that number in that period of time. Here's my HACCP plan with the checks that were done for that number, all rolled up instantaneously. So I know I said earlier, a couple clicks. All I did was click from the program viewer into a report. In 2 clicks in that report, I set a time frame and I set a lot number, and the system regurgitates back everything that's happened, including unalterable date and timestamps of when it happened, any comments or corrective actions that were resulted with it if they've been resolved. So instantaneous access to this information is key, and I think that's where we've started to really see the value of automation and systems in place, right? It's obviously the fun, trending, and yes, when I say fun, this really starts to help drive that bottom line value and start to affect outcomes, maybe even allowing you to make your system, your facility, you know, larger without actually increasing the walls, right? The idea that we can help with that productivity and outcome. But obviously a key end result is quick access to that information. Show me everything that's important to me at this moment. And that's what we've really seen come out of automation. So with that, I'm going to pull back to the PowerPoint. Yeah, Jill?
Yeah. So we did have one question that came in regards to the program viewer and as far as managing programs. So you talked about specific Canadian and SQF. So I think the clarification was, can you manage any program within the system?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, so that's obviously a loaded question, right? But as you guys are sitting here looking at this, right, it's a loaded question. And yes, you can have the program viewer supports any program, right? This is again a demo environment, right? But people might have a specific allergen program, for example, right, where they go through. It could actually be, you know, many of you might be Primus GFS, or you might be BRC. How about that? We'll give you BRC. So the answer to the question, Jill, is yes. It supports programs in any of this hierarchy. Many people have come to us and said, hey, why isn't FSMA in there? Well, as many of you are well aware, FSMA doesn't have these necessarily program items like this, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. At this point, some point they might get there. But yes, anything that has a programmatic schema like this, Jill, can be put into the system. We do also automate the provisioning of these programs as well. So if it's the common programs that we have, you know, BRC, FSSC 22000, SQF, things like that, we actually can automatically provision it as well into the system. So yes, it supports any program, Jill, as long as it has kind of a layout or a schematic. Think of an ISO schematic as well, for sure.
Right. So there was just a quick add-on. We might as well go down this because I think it's a good question as well that came in about this. So the idea here is, obviously, you have an SQF program, but you also have to abide by a FSMA rule, or if you have a different thing. So one record could tie to many programs, and the person is asking, is that something that has to be identified every single time? You want to sort of share how the system works in that way?
No, I actually cut this short because I didn't want to go through that whole thing, but Jill, and to the question, it's a great comment, right? So within our system, one document could support, for example, SQF 2.3. It might also support your HACCP plan, right? It might also support, you know, we had a customer the other day saying that they're going to do both BRC and SQF. They have both programs in the system, and they actually can link one document that supports different codes throughout. The idea is that within the system, there's actually this linking that occurs. So I'm showing you an example of a SOP here, but the idea is that this SOP supports a piece of equipment, my thermometers, as you're seeing here on your screen, but it also supports different areas of different codes. So in this case, you're seeing it supports 2.4.2 as well as 2.4.6. And for fun, I have it linked to the BRC 6.4 as well. It also may be linked to multiple locations. So that's exactly a key element, Jill, on that question. I'm thinking that's where they were heading. This does away. So once this document's approved and the version is approved, anyone who comes into the system to access this from a HACCP plan standpoint or an SQF standpoint or wherever they're getting to the system, they're only seeing that one approved document, and no one has to remember where that document lives and goes and replaces it. Remember back in the day, we would print out an SOP and tack it to a desk. And then anytime that SOP was updated, we had to go around to every desk and make sure that SOP was updated. In this case, it automatically proliferates out to any of those areas that it should be attached to, and it's only once and done.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Sure. So just pulling this back around, because I know I got to keep an eye on everyone's time. So I'm sure every one of you has 100 things that need to get done after this call. So how SafetyChain helps, especially around visibility, knowledge, and control, right? Hopefully you saw a couple examples here today. Ensuring compliance. You have a great program in place today. Guarantee it. Every one of you, the reason you showed up is because you may or may not be looking to help your programs get even better. But you showed up because you care about your programs and how you might actually access that data. Controlling costs. It's simple. Get access to that information, right? That information may not just come from a mobile phone. Maybe it comes from a piece of equipment. Maybe it comes from a Bluetooth probe. The idea of pooling all of that data together, giving you not only data for root cause analysis, but then to ultimately, as Jill kind of ended up on, reduce those risks as well, right? Which I know we're all hypersensitive about, let's say. Just a brief, it's fun. I know some of you are on the phone. Actually, some of you may see your own logo here on the phone. But the idea that we do this for large and small organizations. The reason I point this slide out is because we're very proud. What you just saw today was a live functioning system. We don't go and custom build these solutions. We've spent years and tens of millions of dollars creating a baseline. Just like the question you asked about the programs. Hey, could that support another program? We designed it with that exact question in mind. We designed our system with the exact question in mind of what's your auditor going to ask for? They're going to ask for the documentation, they're going to ask for the form, and they're going to ask for the records. And then we ultimately designed it with the idea of what's your CEO, what's your COO, what's your CFO want to see out of a system like this. It wants to see that data, those reports. It wants to be able to allow you to lower those trends and ultimately produce a better profit margin, right? And just to give you a final piece of SafetyChain, the suite, I kind of hit on a bunch of different areas today, but it can be broken down as well, and this is important. Many of you will come to SafetyChain and say, hey, you know what? Right now, my main component is food quality, right? My main component is supplier compliance. Hey, my main component is we have a bunch of PLCs on our floor that can generate data. Can you help us with that? Yes, we can, right? So the idea that these can be, yes, it's one system, but they can be broken out into different modules and ultimately give you any of that data that you're looking for. Just to hit on that as we move forward. So Jill, I think this brings us back to where you wanted to just give a couple of good examples. How about that as we go through a couple of good examples here? Real world examples for the crew on the phone, and we'll wrap this up.
Wrap up from there. Yeah, no, that's great. And I think really the idea here is, one, of course, to show you what can be achieved, but also, again, from a data, what is data, what the results can be achieved with that. So we just have a couple quick case studies here that we'll go through. Dave, if you want to move on, and just sort of the results that are being achieved. You want to take us through this one?
Yeah, sure. So big ag processor. I think everyone on the phone can probably read, but the idea that I'm sure every one of you can track customer complaints. The idea with the utilization of our system, it dropped customer complaints by 58%. That was because the system was capturing issues earlier, right? Not only that, think about that increased acceptance rate. So these folks are actually shipping cargo ships around the globe, right? Coming in, making sure that things are they are compliant, I should say. The idea that this has really driven a bottom line value, right? Of not having to go retrieve that or logistically reroute that ship because of a container full of whatever it might be. But this was a big deal, and a big deal that continues to be tracked across our customers, not only increasing that customer satisfaction, but at the same time, helping the bottom line value. In this case, it was around shipping and testing and making sure the proper requirements were made for wherever that customer may live in the country that they actually incurred the product with. Another example, Jill? You got anything you wanted to add to that?
No, let's just keep going in the interest of time. I think the idea here is we just want to show you a little bit ways that the system is being used and the results throughout the supply chain. So go ahead.
Yeah, this is another good one. I know many of you on the phone, like I said, or have had the opportunity to speak, the pleasure to speak with some of you. Many of you have multiple facilities. How do you get insight into those facilities that they're actually running properly, that they're actually doing those programs that you have put into place? The idea that this organization was spending hundreds of hours a year in travel in between 6 and 7 different facilities, making sure things are being done, reviewing the documentation, reviewing the records, reviewing the data, reviewing the information. Number one, we cut down that travel time. So think overhead costs, just cut down. Person can log in from anywhere to see this information, make sure it's running properly. But also this combination of driving program standardization, or some people will call it harmonization, and that ability then to leverage that data to have better performing operations, right? So the idea that not everyone's doing it the same way, it's tough to aggregate and pull all that data together. Where it is possible to do it all in the same way, it's a great way to start to pull that data together and use it for reporting and trending. This is a pretty easy one I think many of you will be aware of, right? What happens when you miss a CCP check? What happens when that CCP check hasn't been done? Maybe it's a metal detector. In this place it was glass and brittle plastics. The idea that many times you have to put that on hold, right? Maybe you have to rerun it through the process, through the metal detector. Maybe you have to rework it, right? The idea here is that the system, again, is monitoring those programs, making sure that those CCP checks are being done. In this case, they're, the idea that product may actually have to be discarded, waste, right? And in this case, that's what we're talking about, making sure those programs are being done, so no CCP is being missed, and that there is no loss of product as things go through your process, right? Or overhead, or rework, or extra man hours. There's many things that go into the bottom line of this in guaranteeing that things have been done in a real-time process. And I think this is the last one, and I apologize, Jill. I seem to have gotten on a roll, and I'm over our time, but the idea that this is the last one here, where again, I talked briefly about PLCs and monitoring actual data, the idea that an organization is using our system in their clean-in-place equipment, right? The idea that we're not only monitoring water usage, everyone on the phone has a sustainability initiative, I know that, right? So not only that sustainability initiative, but then also that ability to monitor chemical usage, electricity usage, right? The idea that our system has delivered back over $1 million to this organization just around capturing that data and being better able to fine-tune that information and fine-tune their processing, right? So automation can definitely help. We believe the driver of automation, for every one of you on the phone, you didn't come here, I'm assuming, if you did, you'll have my email here in a moment directly. If you came here with a check to buy software today, that'd be great. But what we understand is you're going to turn around and go, hey, why is this valuable to my organization? And these were just a couple brief examples of how it has been valuable. Every one of you may have a different scenario, and that's okay. The idea is that we're more than willing to walk through these scenarios with you, uncover that information, as time permits, but it is we're seeing this data just being highly leveraged throughout organizations to show bottom line value back to the organizations, which for many of you should be good, right? You always want to produce that bottom line value back to the organization. So with that, Jill, I think that I'm over my time and have made sufficiently our webinar too long, so I apologize to everybody on the phone. But hopefully it was helpful, and I appreciate you hanging in there for the kind of first go-around of using live environment combination as we went through this.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Dave. And again, thank you. Again, we're right around the right time, and it looks like a lot of people stayed on with us. We appreciate that. Let's see if there's any questions that have come in. One, let's just throw out just a few quick questions, Dave, that came out. And for those that do need to log off, thank you for joining us. You will automatically get the recording as mentioned, as well as a request form will pop up if you want to request more information. If you're not part of our FSMA Fridays, it's a monthly update with Dr. Atchison and the Atchison Group team. We have one tomorrow, Environmental Controls, and then certainly visit us SafetyChain.com to learn more if you need it. But I think really the goal here, just circling back, is, again, real-time data and, having the capability to have data really work hard for you and leverage it more appropriately to make you more efficient in what you do every day. So with that, there was just a couple key questions that came in. I'll throw at you, Dave. Just regards to the system in managing and getting it up and running. Dana, I'll start there and you could finish up, but I think the idea is, you know, how hard is it to get this going? You know, is it something you just turn on, or are we there to help you?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is there to be just turned on, Jill. As you said, it is it's not a custom solution, as I mentioned, but we have professionals. So in each one of our projects, we'll assign a business analyst and a project manager to help with that configuration and train you on the configuration. So you and your team, as much as they would like, can build and change as much as they, as much as they would like to. But the idea is that the baseline allows us to very quickly adapt to your environment. What we're not doing is we're not pushing out templates, right? We have some templates. We've seen like some GAMP audits and things like that we've templatized. But again, each operation has a different form or a different piece of equipment. And what we'll do is we'll very quickly and easily configure this, configure your specific programs into the system to start to give you that data back and start to have that ability to do it. So it's not difficult. We've created these things. What you see is what you get. It's called a WYSIWYG in software terminology, where you can drop and drag and build these forms, and you can drop and drag and build those reports. So it doesn't take a coder to do it, but we do provide the professionals to help set it up, Jill, as part of the process.
Okay, great. Another question came in just in regards to the SafetyChain Analytics tool. One person noticed that it was a separate browser and wanted to know, is that a separate solution, or does it come part of the different solution sets that we outlined?
It's baked in. We do open it up as a separate browser. Many times people will keep their browsers purposely open, right, as they're running it or doing their own checks. It is part of the solution. We don't sell the analytics standalone at this point, because we don't have any way to get to, I mean, we have ways. We could use APIs to get data into it, right? Maybe it's a piece of equipment that's coming in or sending data, but it is an analytic tool that's baked into it, and it does open up in that separate browser.
Great, thank you. And that, we're very excited. That's a new released analytics tool that has just really propelled the ability to get real-time data to nth degree. That's great. And then just someone's asking about a customized demo. So I'll just throw that out, and that'll be the last question here as far as demoing to their team. Absolutely, we can do that, and we'll take that question offline. But again, the idea here is there's different solutions, different needs per company. So, conversation and discern what is the most important to you and what you're trying to achieve and your objectives and goals. And then we'll have a nice conversation around how that can be handled and managed so that we're not presenting everything, but something really specific to you. Anything you want to add to that, Dave?
No, we'd love to. It'd be great.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So in the interest of time, I think we had a few more questions. We'll take those offline. Really appreciate everyone hanging on with us here. I know it's a lot of information, and as you can see from Dave and I have worked together for many years. We're very excited about what we do. So in our congenial sort of conversational tone in this session, it just was very excited to share, a little bit more about the concept of data and be able to leverage it more effectively to run your operations better. Any questions you had to support either one of us, please reach out, and look forward to perhaps talking to you and seeing you guys all online soon in the near future. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.